Catherine Moore stepped off the transport ship and onto the gleaming floor of the Alcarian Imperial docking bay. She straightened her navy blue diplomatic uniform and adjusted the small golden pin that marked her as Earth's official representative. At 53, Catherine had silver streaks in her brown hair and lines around her eyes that crinkled when she smiled. Most people saw only a polite, middle-aged woman. They never looked closely enough to notice her watchful eyes or the way she constantly measured her surroundings. "Ambassador Moore, welcome to the Imperial Palace," said a tall, blue-skinned alien with 4 arms. He wore the elaborate uniform of the Royal Protocol Office. "I am First Chamberlain Grizik. King Zexorian XIII awaits your arrival with great anticipation." Catherine smiled pleasantly. "Thank you for the warm welcome, First Chamberlain. The Earth Interstellar Coalition values this opportunity to strengthen our relationship with the Alcarian Empire." Her young aide, Lieutenant Alan Fraser, stood a step behind her. He was 30, with close-cropped blonde hair and an eager expression that made him look even younger. This was his first diplomatic mission, and he clutched his datapad nervously. "Gandarao, King has prepared a reception in your honor," Grizik said, guiding them toward a hovering transport platform. "Your luggage will be delivered to your quarters." As they glided through the vast palace complex, Catherine observed everything. She noted the number of guards, the locations of security cameras, and the pattern of patrol movements. Old habits? Never died, no matter how long she had been a diplomat. "The palace is 17,000 years old," Grizik explained proudly. "The Alcarian Empire controls 3/4 of the Milky Way galaxy. Hundreds of species serve under our benevolent rule. Yet Earth remains independent," Catherine remarked mildly. The Chamberlain's 4 hands twitched. "A temporary arrangement, I'm sure." Alan shifted uncomfortably behind her, but Catherine just smiled. They arrived at a massive hall with ceilings that soared hundreds of feet high. Alien dignitaries of all shapes and sizes mingled under floating lights that looked like stars. A band played strange music using instruments Catherine had never seen before. "Ambassador Moore of Earth," a voice boomed, announcing her arrival. The crowd parted as King Zexorian approached. He towered at 7 feet tall with iridescent scales covering his body and 3 pairs of yellow eyes arranged vertically on his face. He wore a flowing red cape and a crown that seemed to be made of living metal, constantly shifting and changing shape. "The human representative arrives at last," the king said. His voice sounded like several people speaking at once. "We expected you yesterday." Catherine bowed precisely the correct amount for her diplomatic rank, showing respect but not submission. "My apologies, Your Majesty. A solar storm delayed our ship. I'm grateful for your patience and the opportunity to strengthen the bonds between our peoples." The king's multiple eyes blinked in different patterns. "Bonds? Is that what humans call them?" "I would describe our arrangement as a generous allowance on our part." Several aliens nearby laughed. Catherine maintained her diplomatic smile, but Alan tensed beside her. "Perhaps we have different perspectives," Catherine said smoothly. "That's why dialogue is so important. Earth has much to offer in a fair partnership." "Does it?" The king circled her slowly. "Your species controls just one small solar system. You've barely left your cradle, while we have ruled the stars for millennia." "True," Catherine nodded. "Yet in the Battle of Proxima Centauri, our small fleet held against forces 10 times their size. In the Tau Ceti negotiation, our traders secured favorable terms from the Sindal Consortium. Humans may be new to the galactic community, but we learn quickly." The king's eyes narrowed at the subtle reminder of past human successes. "You speak boldly for someone so far from home, Ambassador." "I speak truthfully, Your Majesty. The best diplomacy begins with honesty." King Zexorian laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "Then honestly, Ambassador Moore, you and your kind are temporary anomalies in my expanding empire. Enjoy the reception." He turned and walked away, his guards following. Alan leaned close to Catherine. "That went well," he whispered sarcastically. "It went as expected," Catherine replied quietly. "He's testing us, seeing how we respond to pressure." They moved through the reception, meeting representatives from other species. Some were coldly polite, obviously aligned with the king. Others showed subtle signs of interest in the humans who had managed to remain independent. An hour later, a small green alien with large black eyes approached Catherine. Thrixol was an old contact, a diplomat from the Meridian Alliance who had worked with humans before. "Ambassador Moore," Thrixol greeted her. "So good to see Earth still has a seat at the table." "Thrixol, it's been too long." Catherine smiled genuinely this time. "How are things in the Meridian sectors?" The alien glanced around carefully. "Increasingly difficult. The king expands his influence daily. But listen carefully. This diplomatic summit is not what it appears." Catherine kept her expression pleasant as if they were discussing nothing important. "Oh?" "The king never intended to negotiate fairly," Thrixol whispered. "My sources say he plans to use this summit as cover for military operations against your outer colonies." Catherine showed no reaction, but her mind raced. That would violate 3 separate treaties. "Treaties mean little to those who believe they cannot lose," Thrixol replied. "Be careful, Ambassador. You may have less time than you think." Before Catherine could respond, Thrixol was called away by another diplomat. Alan, who had overheard the conversation, looked pale. "Should we contact Earth Command?" he asked quietly. Catherine shook her head slightly. "Not yet. Our communications are certainly monitored. We need to verify this information first." A tall Alcarian official approached them. "Ambassador Moore, the king has arranged a special tour of our ancient catacombs for you tomorrow. It is a rare honor." "How thoughtful," Catherine replied. "We look forward to it." After the official left, Alan whispered, "A trap?" "Almost certainly," Catherine said calmly. "But it might give us the information we need." Later that night in her luxurious quarters, Catherine checked for listening devices. Finding several, she left them intact. She took out a datapad and wrote a message as if sending a routine update to Earth, while actually using coded language to alert them to possible danger. When Alan visited her quarters for a briefing, she handed him a glass of water. "What do you know about the Mars rebellions, Lieutenant?" she asked. Alan looked surprised. "Standard history, ma'am. 20 years ago, Mars colonists tried to break from Earth control. The conflict lasted 3 months, before the rebels surrendered." Catherine nodded. "And what about the operative they called Baba Yaga?" Alan blinked. "Just rumors, ma'am. Some kind of black ops specialist who turned the tide. They say rebels would rather surrender than risk meeting her." He paused. "Why do you ask?" Catherine looked out at the alien stars. "Because tomorrow we may need more than diplomatic skills to survive. I hope the rumors were exaggerated." She smiled at him, once again looking like a kindly diplomat rather than someone discussing covert operations. "Get some rest, Lieutenant. Tomorrow will be interesting." What Alan didn't notice was how Catherine's hand briefly touched a hidden compartment in her diplomatic luggage, where equipment no diplomat would ever carry waited for when Baba Yaga would need to emerge once more. The next morning, Catherine dressed in the formal diplomatic attire provided for the tour. The outfit included a long blue jacket with Earth's emblem and comfortable but elegant shoes. What wasn't visible were the modifications she had made overnight: reinforced fabric that could stop most energy weapons, hidden pockets containing small tools, and boots with steel-reinforced toes. "Ready for our cultural experience, Lieutenant?" Catherine asked when Alan arrived at her door. "As ready as I'll ever be, Ambassador," Alan replied. He looked like he hadn't slept well. "Do you really think they'll try something in the catacombs? Let's..." "Hope not," Catherine said. "But remember what I told you. Stay close, observe everything, and if I give you a signal, don't hesitate." Their Alcarian guide, a slender female named Vexel, met them at the palace's lower levels. "The catacombs date back to the early days of our empire," she explained as they descended in a glass elevator. "They hold the remains of our greatest rulers and the treasures of conquered worlds." "How educational," Catherine remarked pleasantly. Her eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, noting emergency exits and security cameras. The catacombs were vast tunnels carved from glittering black stone. Soft blue lights illuminated the path, and the air felt cool and dry. They passed elaborate burial chambers where the preserved bodies of ancient alien kings lay on stone platforms. These rulers lived over 10,000 years ago, Vexel said, proudly. Even then, our empire spanned 50 star systems. Impressive, Catherine nodded. Earth was still developing agriculture at that time. The tour continued deeper into the catacombs. Catherine noticed they had passed the same security checkpoint twice. They were going in circles, but toward what purpose? After 30 minutes, Vexel led them down a narrow corridor Catherine hadn't seen before. This section contains artifacts from more recently conquered worlds, the guide explained. You might find it particularly interesting. The corridor opened into a large chamber. Inside were weapons, flags, and cultural items from dozens of planets. Catherine recognized some from species that had lost their independence to the Alcarian Empire in recent centuries. Is that a human pulse rifle? Alan asked suddenly, pointing to a display case. Catherine's senses immediately went to high alert. The weapon was indeed human-made, but Earth had never lost a war to the Alcarian. Its presence here was a message, or a threat. How observant, Vexel said with a thin smile. A specimen we acquired during a misunderstanding with one of your outer colonies. Now I must check something with security. Please wait here. Vexel left through a side door, which sealed shut behind her. We're being set up, Catherine said quietly, dropping her diplomatic demeanor. This isn't on any official tour route. Alan checked his communicator. No signal. We're being jammed. A soft hum filled the room as hidden panels in the walls slid open. 3 spherical security drones floated out, each about the size of a human head. Red scanning beams swept across Catherine and Alan. Unidentified humans in restricted military zone. An automated voice announced, initiating containment protocol. The drone's outer shells rotated, revealing small weapons ports. Ambassador, get down, Alan shouted, reaching for the ceremonial sidearm all diplomatic security carried. But Catherine was already moving. She dropped to the floor and rolled as the first drone fired, the energy blast missing her by inches. In one fluid motion, she pulled a decorative pin from her jacket, actually a small EMP device inflicted at the nearest drone. The pin attached to the drone's surface and pulsed with blue light. The drone sputtered and fell to the floor with a clang. Alan stared in shock. No regular diplomat would carry EMP devices disguised as jewelry. The remaining drones focused on Catherine, identifying her as the primary threat. She moved with astonishing speed and precision for a woman her age, diving behind a display case as energy blasts shattered artifacts around her. Alan, the case on your left. Smash it, Catherine called out. Alan broke the glass display containing the human pulse rifle. As alarms began to blare throughout the catacombs, Catherine reached for the weapon. It's been disabled, Alan said, noticing the missing power cell. Not completely, Catherine replied, and with practiced hands she reversed the rifle's internal wiring. When the next drone approached, she jammed the rifle's barrel against its sensor array and triggered a feedback loop that overloaded the drone's circuits. The third drone backed away, apparently recognizing the threat. It changed tactics, releasing a cloud of paralytic gas. Catherine reached into her boot and pulled out a small breathing filter, slipping it over her nose and mouth. She tossed a second one to Alan. Ambassador, who are you? Alan asked, his voice muffled by the filter. Catherine didn't answer. Instead, she picked up a decorative staff from a fallen display and hurled it like a javelin at the ventilation control panel on the wall. The panel sparked and the fans reversed, sucking the gas away. With the air clearing, Catherine charged the final drone. It fired rapidly, but she moved with the practiced precision of someone who had trained for combat for decades. She slid beneath its line of fire, then leaped up behind it, attaching a small device to its underside. The drone spun, trying to target her, but its systems faltered. Whatever Catherine had attached to it was disrupting its programming. With a final mechanical whir, it dropped to the floor. We need to move, Catherine said calmly, straightening her jacket as if nothing unusual had happened. They'll send human guards next. Alan stared at her. You? You just took out 3 security drones with diplomatic accessories. A lucky coincidence, Catherine said, but her eyes told a different story. Now help me with this door. Together, they forced open the sealed entrance. The hallway beyond was empty, but alarm lights flashed along the ceiling. Follow me and act natural, Catherine instructed, immediately resuming her dignified diplomatic posture. If we encounter anyone, let me do the talking. They navigated the catacombs, Catherine seemingly knowing which path to take despite never having been there before. Within minutes, they reached a public area where other tour groups looked confused by the alarms. When a security team rushed past, Catherine gently pulled Alan into a conversation with some alien tourists, blending in perfectly. Soon Vexel reappeared with several security officers. "Ambassador Moore, thank goodness you're safe," she exclaimed with obviously fake concern. There was a terrible malfunction in the historical weapons sector. How did you find your way out? We got lost after you left, Catherine said pleasantly. Fortunately, we found our way to this main area. What kind of malfunction? Automated. Defenses activated incorrectly, Vexel said, watching Catherine's face carefully. It's most unusual. How frightening that would have been, Catherine replied with just the right amount of diplomatic concern. Perhaps we should return to the palace proper? I believe we have trade discussions scheduled this afternoon. Back in her quarters, Catherine found a message waiting on her secure channel. Starling protocol active. She read it twice, then deleted it. Earth Command had confirmed the King's hostile intentions. Her mission parameters had changed from diplomacy to something much darker. When Alan entered, still shaken from their experience, Catherine was removing the false bottom from her luggage. Inside was equipment no diplomat would carry. Advanced communications gear, weapons, and tactical devices. It wasn't a malfunction, was it? Alan asked quietly. They tried to kill us. Not us, Catherine corrected, looking up at him with eyes that suddenly seemed much older and harder. Me. The King never intended to negotiate, and now neither do I. Catherine sat across from King's Exorian in the grand negotiation chamber. 3 days had passed since the accident in the catacombs. Neither had mentioned it directly, but the tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Your proposed trade terms are unacceptable, the King said, his multiple eyes blinking in different patterns. Humans ask for too much and offer too little. We ask for fair treatment, Catherine replied calmly. The same mining rights your empire grants to the Meridian Alliance. The Meridians have been our allies for centuries, the King sneered. Humans are newcomers who don't know their place. Alan watched from his position behind Catherine. Since the catacomb incident, he had seen his superior with new eyes. The way she moved, the constant awareness of her surroundings, the hidden strength in her seemingly ordinary frame. These were not traits of a career diplomat. Perhaps we should break for the day, suggested First Chamberlain Grizik, sensing the growing hostility. A formal banquet has been prepared in the Grand Hall to honor our human guests. Catherine smiled politely. That sounds wonderful. We would be honored to attend. As they left the negotiation chamber, Alan leaned close to Catherine. The King is stalling. He has no intention of reaching an agreement. I know, Catherine replied softly. Be extra alert tonight. Watch what you eat and drink. The Grand Hall had been transformed for the banquet. Floating lights cast a golden glow over long tables filled with exotic foods from across the galaxy. Alien dignitaries mingled, their varied forms creating a living tapestry of interstellar politics. Catherine took her assigned seat near the King's table. Before her sat a plate of carefully arranged food items, selected to be compatible with human biology. A special dish prepared just for humans, announced the royal chef, a tall, spindly alien with 6 arms, adapted from Earth recipes for your comfort. Catherine nodded in thanks. She casually moved her hand over the plate, the large ring on her finger briefly glowing green before returning to normal. No one but Alan noticed this subtle scan for toxins. The dinner proceeded with formal speeches and elegant courses. Catherine ate very little, mostly moving food around her plate while engaging in diplomatic small talk with those nearby. During the third course, she took a sip from her goblet. Minutes later, she placed a hand to her forehead. "Ambassador, are you unwell?" asked a concerned alien diplomat. "Just a slight headache," Catherine said, her voice slightly strained. "Nothing to worry about." But as the banquet continued, her condition visibly worsened. Her face grew pale and her hands began to tremble. Finally, during a musical performance, Catherine stood abruptly, swayed on her feet, and collapsed to the floor. The hall erupted in commotion. Alan rushed to her side, calling for help. King Xexorian rose from his seat, a look of concern on his face that didn't reach his eyes. "Our medical team will assist the ambassador," the king said. "Take her to our health facility immediately." "No," Alan said firmly, surprising himself with his boldness. "Our diplomatic treaty gives us the right to treat our own. I will take her to our quarters where we have human medical supplies." The king seemed about to object, but other diplomats were watching closely. "As you wish," he said coldly. "Do inform us if we can be of assistance." With the help of another human aide, Alan carried Catherine back to their diplomatic quarters. As soon as the doors closed behind them, Catherine's eyes snapped open. "Lock the door and activate privacy protocols," she ordered, her voice perfectly normal. Alan stared in shock. "You're not sick?" "Not yet," Catherine said, sitting up. "The drink was poisoned with a slow-acting toxin. I detected it but pretended to be affected." She pulled a small device from her pocket and injected herself with it. "This will neutralize what little got into my system." "Why fake being poisoned?" Alan asked, confused. "Because now they think I'm dying or dead," Catherine explained. "And that gives us the advantage of surprise." She moved to her luggage and removed more equipment. "I need the medical kit from the second compartment." Alan retrieved what looked like a standard medical kit. Catherine opened it to reveal advanced surveillance equipment. "This isn't a med kit," Alan said. "No, it's not," Catherine agreed. She activated the device, which projected a holographic display of their quarters. Dozens of red dots appeared, marking listening devices and cameras. "We've been watched from the moment we arrived." "What do we do now?" Alan asked. "First, we maintain the fiction that I'm gravely ill," Catherine said, setting up a device that would create false life signs for any monitoring equipment. "Then we find out exactly what the king is planning." She opened a secret pocket in her diplomatic uniform and removed a small communication device. "Earth Command suspected this might happen. That's why they sent me." "Because you're not really a diplomat," Alan said slowly, pieces falling into place. Catherine looked at him directly. "I am a diplomat now, but before that," she paused. "Have you ever wondered why they call me Baba Yaga?" Alan's eyes widened. "The rumors are true? You're the operative from the Mars rebellions?" "I was sent to Mars to end a conflict that had already cost thousands of lives," Catherine said, her voice neither proud nor apologetic. "I did what was necessary. When it was over, I was given a new identity in the diplomatic corps." She checked her equipment. "They didn't send me because I'm a good negotiator, Alan. They sent me because I'm the contingency plan." In the royal palace, King Xexorian received the news of the ambassador's collapse with satisfaction. In his private war room, he addressed his military commanders. "The human ambassador will not survive the night," he said. "Her death will appear to be an unfortunate reaction to alien food. By the time Earth learns what happened, our fleet will have already launched." On a large holographic display, dozens of warships appeared, positioned near the human outer colonies. "The main attack will begin in 12 hours, the king announced. "By the end of the standard week, humanity will understand its true place in our empire." What the king didn't know was that one of his commanders wore a tiny device in his ear, planted by Catherine during a diplomatic reception days earlier. Every word was being transmitted to her equipment. "The attack is coming sooner than we thought," Catherine told Alan as they listened to the king's plans. "They're moving against the outer colonies in 12 hours. "We need to warn Earth," Alan said urgently. Catherine tried to access their secure communication channel but found it blocked. They've cut off all outgoing transmissions. We're on our own. She opened another hidden compartment in her luggage, revealing compact weapons and tactical gear. We have to move fast. The king believes I'm dying, which means security around us will be lighter. What's the plan? Alan asked, watching as Catherine expertly checked a small energy pistol. We need to reach their communications center, she said. If we can't warn Earth directly, we'll have to disrupt the attack fleet ourselves. Alan looked at the weapons, then back at Catherine. I've never been in combat. Catherine paused and placed a hand on his shoulder. I didn't ask for this life, Alan, but right now we're the only thing standing between those colonies and destruction. Her eyes were steady and determined. Are you with me? Alan took a deep breath, then nodded. What do I need to do? Catherine handed him a small device. First, we need to create a diversion. Then we move through the service tunnels I mapped during our first day here. She smiled slightly at his surprised expression. A good operative always plans escape routes. Now let's show the king why humans have stayed independent for so long. As they prepared to leave, Catherine looked at the diplomatic insignia on her uniform. With a quick motion, she removed it and placed it on the table. Diplomacy has failed, she said quietly. Now Baba Yaga goes to work. Catherine and Alan moved silently through the dimly lit maintenance tunnels of the palace. Catherine had changed from her diplomatic uniform into a dark, fitted combat suit hidden in her luggage. Alan still wore his aide uniform, but now carried several small devices Catherine had given him. The security hub is 2 levels down, Catherine whispered, checking a small holographic map projected from her wrist device. Once we're there, I can access their communication systems. Alan nodded, trying to stay calm. Just days ago, he had been a regular diplomatic aide. Now he was sneaking through alien tunnels with a legendary covert operative. How many guards? He asked. At least 6 based on the security patterns I've observed, Catherine replied. But we won't be fighting them if we can help it. They reached a junction where the tunnel split in 3 directions. Catherine pointed to the right path. As they turned the corner, they came face to face with 2 Alcarian maintenance workers. The aliens froze in surprise. Before they could react, Catherine stepped forward with lightning speed. Her hands moved in precise strikes to pressure points on the aliens' bodies. Both workers collapsed, unconscious but unharmed. Pressure point technique, Catherine explained, dragging the bodies into a storage alcove. They'll wake up with headaches, nothing more. Alan stared at her. Where does a diplomat learn something like that? Mars Special Forces training, Catherine said simply. Let's keep moving. They continued through the tunnels, occasionally pausing as Catherine consulted her map. Finally, they reached a heavily reinforced door with a security panel. This is it, Catherine said. The security control center is beyond this door. She pulled out a small device and attached it to the panel. Numbers flashed across its screen as it worked to bypass the lock. What's our plan once we're inside? Alan asked. I need to access their main computer core, Catherine explained. From there, I can gather intelligence on their attack fleet and potentially disrupt their communications. The bypass device beeped softly, and the door slid open with a quiet hiss. Catherine motioned for Alan to stay back as she peered inside. The security hub was a large room filled with monitoring screens and control panels. 6 guards in royal security uniforms watched the displays. Catherine pulled a small sphere from her belt and tossed it into the room. It rolled across the floor, releasing a colorless, odorless gas. Within seconds, the guards slumped in their chairs, unconscious. Clear, Catherine said, putting on a small breathing filter and handing one to Alan. The gas will keep them out. For 20 minutes. We need to work fast. They entered the room and Catherine immediately went to the main control panel. Her fingers flew across the alien interface with practiced ease. You know their systems, Alan observed with surprise. I studied Alcarian technology for months before this mission, Catherine replied, not looking up from her work. Earth Command suspected this summit might be a trap. As Catherine accessed the palace's central database, alarm indicators suddenly flashed on several screens. They've discovered the unconscious guards in the catacombs, she said, working faster. Security will tighten. Alan watched the door nervously. How much longer? Almost there, Catherine replied, downloading critical data to her wrist device. Got it. Fleet positions, command codes, attack plans, everything we need. Suddenly, a loud alarm blared throughout the palace. A voice spoke in the Alcarian language, then repeated in Galactic Standard. Alert! Human intruders in security sector. All personnel to battle stations. Time to go, Catherine said, finishing her download. They know it's us. They left the security hub and raced back into the maintenance tunnels. Behind them, they could hear the heavy footsteps of security forces. This way, Catherine said, leading Alan down a different path than they had come. We need to reach the communication center. Won't that be heavily guarded now? Alan asked, breathing hard as they ran. Yes, but it's our only chance to warn the colonies, Catherine replied. They turned a corner and found themselves facing 4 elite royal guards, their weapons already drawn. The aliens were tall, muscular, and covered in armor that glowed with energy fields. Surrender, humans, one guard commanded. By order of King Zexorian. Catherine stepped forward, her posture changing subtly. Gone was any trace of the diplomatic persona she had maintained for years. Her eyes became cold and focused, in a way that made even the armed guards hesitate. Let us pass, she said quietly. The guards laughed. 1 human female against 4 royal elites. Your species truly is delusional. Catherine moved so fast that Alan barely saw what happened. She flowed between the guards like water, striking with precision and impossible strength. She used their own momentum against them, redirecting their attacks and exploiting gaps in their defenses. Within seconds, 2 guards were down. The third managed to fire his weapon, but Catherine had already moved. She slid beneath the energy blast, came up behind the guard and disabled him with a strike to the back of his neck. The 4th guard backed away, true fear in his alien eyes. What are you? He asked. Catherine didn't answer. She simply moved forward and ended the confrontation with a precise strike. As the last guard fell, Alan stared in amazement. I've never seen anyone fight like that. Mars combat techniques, Catherine said, barely winded, combined with some things I learned on my own. They continued through the tunnels, encountering more resistance as they went. Each time, Catherine dealt with the threats efficiently, using the minimum force necessary but never hesitating. After fighting their way through several more groups of guards, they finally reached the massive communications hub. Through a ventilation grate, they could see dozens of Alcarian technicians working at control stations. In the center of the room stood a holographic display of the attack fleet, already beginning to move toward the human colonies. We're too late to stop the launch, Catherine said, checking the fleet positions on the display. But we can still cause confusion in their command structure. Suddenly, the palace-wide communication system activated. King Zexorian's voice echoed through every corridor and room. Attention all personnel, the king announced. The human diplomat, loose in our palace, is not what she appears. She is the one humans call Baba Yaga, a killer responsible for the deaths of thousands during their Mars conflict. She is not a diplomat but an assassin, sent to undermine our glorious empire. She must be captured or eliminated at all costs. Alan looked at Catherine. Is that true? Thousands? Catherine's face showed no emotion. The rebels on Mars took an entire colony hostage. Over 20,000 civilians. When diplomatic solutions failed, I was sent in. She met Alan's eyes directly. I did what was necessary to save those hostages, but the cost was high. The stories about what happened grew with each telling. Before Alan could respond, 5 more guards rounded the corner, weapons raised. There they are, one shouted. Take them down. Catherine pushed Alan out of the way as energy blasts scorched the wall where they had been standing. She rolled across the floor, came up with her own weapon drawn, and returned fire with perfect accuracy. We need a new plan, she said as the guards took cover. The communications hub is too well defended now. Alan pointed to a maintenance shaft above them. What about the king's private shuttle bay? You mentioned it was nearby. Catherine's eyes lit up with a dangerous gleam. Lieutenant, you might have a future in covert operations. She fired several more shots to keep the guards pinned down, then leaped up to open the maintenance shaft. If we can't warn Earth, we'll have to stop that fleet ourselves. As they climbed into the shaft, Alan realized that the legends about Baba Yaga hadn't prepared him for the reality. The woman pulling him to safety wasn't a monster from scary stories. She was something far more dangerous. A professional who would do whatever it took to complete her mission and protect her people. The Royal Shuttle Bay gleamed with polished metal and advanced technology. Catherine and Alan crouched behind a stack of cargo containers, surveying the area. 6 guards patrolled around the King's personal vessel, a sleek, silver craft designed for both speed and luxury. That's our target, Catherine whispered, pointing to the Royal Shuttle. It will have the command codes and communications access we need. There are too many guards, Alan said, and more will come when we make our move. Catherine checked her weapons. I'll create a diversion on the far side of the bay. When they respond, make your way to the shuttle and start the pre-launch sequence. Me? Alan looked shocked. I don't know how to fly an alien spacecraft. You've had basic flight training, right? When Alan nodded, Catherine continued. The principles are similar. I've studied their systems. I'll talk you through it once I'm aboard. Before Alan could protest further, Catherine slipped away, moving silently between shadows. She reached the fuel storage area on the opposite side of the bay and planted small devices on several containers. When she was in position, she activated the devices remotely. They created bright flashes and loud explosions, but without causing real damage. As expected, the guards rushed toward the commotion. Alan saw his opportunity and ran for the shuttle. He reached the entry ramp and slipped inside, finding himself in an opulent cabin with plush seating and exotic materials. Following Catherine's earlier instructions, he made his way to the cockpit and stared at the alien controls. Outside, Catherine engaged the remaining guards. She moved with deadly efficiency, using the environment to her advantage. She disabled 2 guards by knocking them into each other, then used a 3rd guard's weapon against the others. Within moments, all 6 lay unconscious. Catherine sprinted to the shuttle just as palace alarms blared again. She sealed the hatch behind her and joined Alan in the cockpit. Good work, she said, quickly taking the pilot's seat. Security will lock down the bay doors any second. Her hands flew across the alien controls, bypassing security measures and activating systems. The engines hummed to life as she entered command codes stolen from the palace computers. Royal authorization override accepted, announced the shuttle's computer in the Alcarian language, then repeated in Galactic Standard. The bay doors began to close, but Catherine accelerated the shuttle forward. They barely cleared the narrowing gap, scraping the shuttle's sides against the massive doors. Hold on, Catherine called as she pushed the engines to full power. The shuttle shot away from the palace, climbing rapidly into the planet's upper atmosphere. Inside the royal palace, King Xexorian watched on the tracking screens as his personal shuttle escaped. Track them and shoot them down, he ordered, his multiple eyes blinking furiously. We can't, Your Majesty, responded his chief of security. She's using your royal codes. The defense systems recognize the shuttle as friendly. The king's scales darkened with rage. Then send fighters after them. They're already out of range, heading toward the attack fleet, the security chief reported. And she's transmitted your royal identification. The fleet will think you're aboard that shuttle. For the first time, real fear showed in the king's eyes. Contact the fleet commander immediately. Tell him the shuttle has been stolen. In the fleeing shuttle, Catherine set course for the Alcarian attack fleet. The navigation screen showed dozens of warships already moving toward the human colonies. Even if we reach them, what can we do against an entire fleet? Alan asked. Catherine accessed the shuttle's communication system. The king's personal vessel has direct command authority over his military. With the codes I stole, I can create enough confusion to delay their attack. She activated the long-range transmitter and began sending contradictory orders to different ships in the fleet, using the king's authorization codes. Some vessels were ordered to return to base, others to hold position, and still others to change course. "It's working," Alan said, watching the fleet's formation break apart on the tactical display. "They're confused." "Not for long," Catherine warned. "Once they establish direct communication with the palace, they'll realize the deception." The shuttle approached the massive Alcarian flagship, a vessel 10 times larger than any human warship. Catherine guided their craft toward its docking bay. "What are you doing?" Alan asked in alarm. "That's the command ship." "Exactly," Catherine replied. "We need to board it and reach the bridge. From there I can send a stand-down order to the entire fleet." Using the royal codes, they received immediate clearance to dock. As they landed, in the flagship's main bay, Catherine handed Alan a small energy pistol. "Stay close to me," she instructed. "With luck, they'll think we're royal messengers until we reach the bridge." They disembarked, Catherine walking with the absolute authority of someone who belonged there. Alcarian officers saluted as they passed, assuming they carried orders directly from the king. They reached the central lift that would take them to the bridge. As the doors closed, an alarm suddenly sounded throughout the ship. "Security alert," announced a voice. "Imposters aboard. All personnel to battle stations." "So much for the element of surprise," Catherine said, drawing her weapons. "We'll have to fight our way to the bridge." When the lift doors opened, they faced a dozen armed soldiers. Catherine moved instantly, firing 2 precise shots that disabled the nearest guards, then leaped into the group. Alan provided covering fire, surprising himself with his accuracy. Together they fought their way through several more security checkpoints, Catherine's combat skills leaving a trail of stunned Alcarian soldiers behind them. Finally, they reached the heavily armored doors of the bridge. "Cover me," Catherine said, attaching a bypass device to the security panel. The device worked quickly, and the massive doors slid open. Inside, the bridge crew turned in shock. At the center stood the fleet commander, a tall Alcarian with battle scars across his scales. "The human intruder," he growled, drawing his ceremonial blade. "The one they call Baba Yaga." Catherine stepped forward, her weapons lowered but ready. "You know who I am, then?" "The king warned us you would come," the commander said. "The killer from Mars disguised as a diplomat." "I'm both," Catherine replied calmly. "And right now I'm giving you one chance to save your crew and your fleet." She tossed a data device onto the command console. "That contains proof the king violated 3 peace treaties by planning this attack. He tried to assassinate a diplomatic envoy and launched an unprovoked assault on civilian colonies." The commander hesitated, his blade still raised. "Check your long-range scanners," Catherine continued. "Earth knew this might happen. Our forces have been positioning for weeks." The commander ordered a sensor sweep. His eyes widened as the results appeared on the main screen. A human fleet twice the size of his own had emerged from hiding behind moons and asteroid fields throughout the sector. They had been there all along, hidden during the diplomatic negotiations as a contingency. "Your king thought humans were weak because we prefer peace," Catherine said. "He didn't realize we prepare for war while working for peace. You're surrounded." The commander lowered his blade slowly. "What do you want?" "Order your fleet to stand down and return to Alcarian space," Catherine said. "Then transmit the evidence of the king's treaty violations to the Galactic Council." After a tense moment, the commander gave the order. Across the sector, Alcarian warships halted their advance and began turning around. Back in the palace, King Zexorian received the news with disbelief. His plans had collapsed, his deception exposed to the Galactic Council, and his fleet defeated without a single shot fired. 2 days later, Catherine and Alan stood in the royal throne room again. But everything had changed. Representatives from the Galactic Council were present, and the king sat subdued on his throne, his royal guards replaced by council peacekeepers. "The council recognizes Earth's right to reparations," announced the chief representative, "and acknowledges the Alcarian violation of diplomatic protocols." The king glared at Catherine with hatred but remained silent. As they left the palace for their ship home, Alan looked at Catherine with newfound respect. "What happens now?" "I return to diplomatic service," she replied simply. The legend of Baba Yaga goes back into the shadows where it belongs. Do you think they'll leave us alone now? Catherine smiled slightly. The galaxy has learned an important lesson today. Never mistake humanity's preference for peace as weakness. And never ever try to assassinate a diplomat without checking her background first. As their ship lifted off from the Alcarian Royal, planet news spread across the galaxy. Cross the humans, and they don't just send armies, they send their Baba Yaga.